Vážené dámy, vážení pánové, moje jméno je Petr Kalousek a je mi potěšením přivítat vás jménem festivalu Meeting Brno na dnešním programu, který pořádáme ve spolupráci s Městským divadlem Brno. Mottem našeho festivalu je Dáváme příběhům tváře. A to je také důvod, proč jsme se rozhodli u příležitosti včerejší premiéry představení Winton pozvat do Brna ty, jichž se jeho příběh nejvíce dotýká. Jak jsme viděli v sestřihu dokumentu Nickyho Rodina režiséra Matěje Mináče, celý příběh Nicholase Wintona poprvé vešel ve známost v roce 1988, kdy moderátorka a producentka pořadu That's Life pozvala Sira Nicholase na natáčení a bez jeho vědomí také ty, které 50 let předtím zachránil. Vedle Nicholase Wintona tehdy seděla Milena Grenfell-Baines a také další Wintonovy děti. A mě je velkou ctí mezi námi přivítat a na jeviště pozvat naše vzácné hosty, jimiž jsou Milena Grenfell-Baines, Eva Paddock, Alf Dubs, přímí účastníci záchrany kindertransportu z roku 1939 a také Nick Winton, syn Nicholase Wintona. Také na jevišti vítám mého milého kolegu Davida Macka, který nás dnešním programem provede. Dámy a pánové, přeji vám inspirativní dopoledne ve společnosti festivalu Meeting Brno. Davide, prosím.
Děkuji, můžeme si. Dámy a pánové, krásné dobré odpoledne od nás, ode všech. Děkuji za to, že jste přišli, děkuji samozřejmě našim vzácným hostům, mimořádným hostům, že zde máme dnes takto osobně přítomny. To je přesně ten moment, pro který pořádáme festival Meeting Brno a naše akce, abychom mohli mít taková osobní setkání. Já bych vám chtěl také moc poděkovat za to, že mnozí z vás už při registraci nám posílali návrhy na otázky. Dovedete si představit, kolik jich asi přišlo. Já jsem se rozhodl, že dneska ani tak nebudeme se věnovat různým detailům z těch příběhů našich hostí, protože toho je internet plný, ale zaměříme se skutečně především na to, čím to poselství Nicholase Wintona oslovuje nás dnes v naší situaci. My jsme společně prožili včera světovou premiéru muzikálu Winton a já bych se na úvod rád zeptal našich hostů, co je především oslovilo, čeho jsou plní po této premiéře. Stačí klidně jenom slova klíčová. Nick.
For me, the way the children were represented was just extraordinary, and I found myself, to my surprise, in tears through most of the second act of the musical. It was quite extraordinary.
Pro mě to znamená, že přátelství je velmi důležité A od první doby, kdy jsme potkali pana Wintona, se pokoušíme říct všem ostatním lidem, aby na sebe byli hodní.
A já mluvím česky, ale to mám tady, forgot some words. Já mluvím jako učitelka, ředitelka školy a pedagog. A pro mě je to moc důležitý, aby Holocaust education byl pro dnešní děti, nejen v knihu. A ten musical and the story of Winton pro mě dělá very, very important as an educational tool, and I would hope that people will use it in that way. It teaches children altruismus a courage. To je, co já beru z toho story.
Omlouvám se, že nemluvím česky, já jsem skoro zapomněl, já mluvím jenom anglicky. I think yesterday evening was fantastic. It was emotional, it was energetic, and it was important. And I think one of the lessons, of many lessons I take with me from Nicholas Winton, is that we all have a responsibility. We just must not walk away from issues. If something comes our way, we should speak up and take action. That is what Nicholas Winton taught us, and that is what the musical last night showed.
Co pro vás Nicholase Winton vlastně stělesňuje, co pro vás zosobňuje, čím pro vás je? Protože my lidé to máme tak, že nám nestačí o kráse, hodnotách, jenom slyšet, jenom číst. My potřebujeme potkat někoho, kdo je stělesňuje, doslova. Já bych tu otázku nechal odpovědět i zde bohužel pro nemoc nepřítomnou redaktorku BBC, které vděčíme za to, že vůbec o Siru Wintonovi víme, Esther Ranson, kterou jste viděli před chvílí. Ta jakoby v tom poselství, které nám dnes posílá, na to také odpovídá. Pro ní Nicholase Winton byl majákem naděje v temných časech, který dokázal, že jediný člověk může změnit svět a přemoci i ty nejhorší zločiny jiných. Nicholase Winton je mým osobním hrdinou a jistě i vaším. Tolik vzkaz ze Švýcarska od Esther Ranson. Mileno, čím je Nicholase Winton pro tebe? Co zosobňuje pro tebe? Jaké hodnoty?
Pro mě je něco, co mi napsal do památníku před 80 lety, s kterým jsem byla ve škole. A jestli dovolíte, je to anglická básnička, která vám řekne přesně, co to znamená. Friendship is a pleasant thing, a thing we can't deny. For once it's indeed in our hearts, then there we let it lie. If there had been friendship then, we would now all be free. So let us least our friendship last, and let everyone see that all the friendship in the world is not enough for me.
I'm answering the same question. I think, for me, Nicky Winton is the ultimate father of everybody. He became everybody's father, and I think he teaches everybody the power of one. Don't sit around waiting for other people to do something. And again, altruism, and we must learn from that.
Yeah, you may know I'm a politician in London. Often, when I do things to do with refugees, I think of Nicky Winton and I think, would he approve this? Would he want me to do that? And the answer is pretty always yes, and it inspires me, and I feel he's still there watching what we do and setting a good example. I think that's been the motto in my life.
To byla slova lorda ze britské sněmovny lordu, který má kromě britského také české občanství, takže i my Češi máme svého lorda. Mimochodem, já si nemůžu pomoct, ale jako kdybych vnímal takové ozvěny Karla Schwarzenberga, když poslouchám tady lorda Dubse, což je obrovská lichotka. Niku, čím dá se ta otázka vůbec položit, ale dneska zkusíme čelit opravdu zásadním otázkám, které mnohdy necháváme stranou. Čím byl tvůj otec pro tebe? Čím je pro tebe? Co zosobňuje pro tebe?
Do you know, for me, he was just Pa. The worst question a journalist asks is, what was it like to have him as a father? Well, I only ever had one, and he was great, you know. I mean, he made me do things I didn't want to do, and, you know, but when I moved back to live with him later in life, we had some amazing conversations, even when I was younger. He was, but he just brought me up with his values, so for me it's, you know, I'm his son. I can't be anything else.
Ti z vás, kdo muzikál už mohli vidět, i ti, kteří ho uvidí, my jsme sdíleli zkušenost, že na mnoha místech nás mrazilo, jak ty pasáže byly aktuální, jako kdyby reagovali na to, co se děje ve světě dnes. Vy s vaší naprosto unikátní zkušeností, jak prožíváte agresi vůči Ukrajině, jak prožíváte rostoucí antisemitismus, abych jmenoval jenom dvě zla, která máme před očima, která se nás přímo dotýkají. Začal bych od lorda v tuto chvíli.
Hello, thank you. You know, you're tempting me to stand up and make a political speech. I shall try not to do that. I think it's a very depressing comment on the world that we have anti-Semitism, we have Islamophobia, we have the terrible things happening in the Ukraine. These are in the world we thought would never see these things again, and yet here we are. And I think we've got to speak up about these things and act. And it's no good just saying, oh, what a pity, and walk away. That's exactly what Nicky Winton did not do. He said, what a pity, and he didn't walk away. And that is a lesson for all of us, whether we're in politics or not. Forgive my political speech, but there we are. And I think that is a lesson for all of us, and I think it's a lesson we take with us. And that's how Nicky Winton inspired us.
I'm not sure how to answer that. I can only say that I live in the States, and you can imagine that living through the playbook of 1938 and 39 is very bothersome and very troublesome. And it makes me very unhappy and very sad to see that happening.
Já mám také velké obavy, co se děje v Anglii. Ale já žiju na severu Anglie a nedávno zvonili dveře a byl tam katolický kněz, který přišel, on ví, že jsem židovka, že o mě mají starost, jestli jsem v pořádku a jestli na mě nejsou zlí lidé.
My father would be horrified at what he sees as a growing lack of tolerance. And he would say something like, why is it okay for you to say whatever you like, but you won't let me say what I think? And yet we all claim to live in a free country. And we see growing dissatisfaction with what some people want to say and then try and shut down other people. And the lack of tolerance seems to be emblematic, mostly at the moment, in religious and refugee situations. But we have to, as Alf says, we have to push back and say, no, we don't buy into this. It's a false narrative that's trying to tempt us into certain courses of action which are just not true.
Včerejší premiéry se tady v divadle zúčastnila také bývalá slovenská prezidentka Zuzana Čaputová, kterou nevím jak vy, ale já mám spojenou zejména s tématem lidskosti. Ona, když si vítala v Bratislavě papeže Františka, tak pronesla větu, které se nemůžu po léta zbavit. Všetko, čo potřebujeme, je lidskost. Je pro mě takovou prezidentkou lidských srdcí, abych parafrázoval Lady Dianu. Už to z vašich odpovědí prosvítá, ale zkusím ještě trošku přitlačit. Co znamená tváří v tvář té dnešní situaci, těm dnešním výzvám jednat lidsky? Jaká je odpovědnost vlastně každého z nás, bez ohledu na naše postavení? Ne každý je ve sněmovně lordů. I would start with Nick.
When we hear something that claims it's their fault, it's them that have caused our problems, ask them how. It's usually just an invention. And I'm afraid to say that what I've seen in the media is not very encouraging. There are many stories which are... For a little while I lived with a journalist, and she would be told by her editor, I want you to go and find somebody who... and then would paint a scenario. So in the editor's mind, he'd already decided the story. He just wanted someone to go and get a fact from real life so that it was true and not an invention. We have to be very careful what we are told, because often it's just designed to make us feel something that may or may not be the truth.
Já bych skoro opakovala přesně, co říká Nick, že mnoho lidí si vymýšlejí věci, aby z toho byly nějaké zprávy. Ale z mé zkušenosti, tam, kde já žiju, musím říct, že jsme prozatím nezažili nic zlého. Ale vím, že v Anglii kolem nás máme přece jenom strach, co se děje.
Okay, I'm in the difficult position that I'm hearing Czech and I can't hear that properly, and I'm hearing English and I can't hear that properly. So what's the question? And I have to say that Alf and I are in the same position. Okay.
What does it mean in today's situation to act humanly?
Say that again, sorry?
What does it mean in today's situation, in front of today's challenges, to act humanly, to remain human?
I think we need to speak up with people who don't hold our own opinion, and we need to listen to them, and we need to have a dialogue. We cannot just say you're wrong and I'm right in either direction. And as far as back to my teaching, children can learn from that exactly the same thing, that they can have difference of opinion and they don't need to bully each other or fight.
May I make two comments in reply to your question? The first is that I think we have to work more internationally. The concern about migration and refugees and asylum seekers and how we deal with it is surely something that requires much higher levels of international cooperation than we've seen up to now. When Angela Merkel took 1 million Syrians and she asked for other European countries to help, and none of them did. And it's a shame on all of us, including in the UK, that we didn't step up and help. That's my first, that I think is my first point. The other one is a little story. I was in a refugee camp in Jordan, And I was talking to a Syrian boy, 16. He'd finished his education in the camp, which was good. He'd tried to get a job in the camp, and he couldn't. He tried to get a job outside the camp, and he couldn't. And he was frightened to go back. And he said to me, "What hope is there for me?" And I think one of our responsibilities, and Nikki would I'm sure have endorsed this, is our job is to give people hope who have no hope. And where conditions are bad, we have to say to them, we offer you hope, and the hope is tangible in terms of giving people fleeing for safety a warm welcome. That is the hope we should offer.
Eva i Alf teď vlastně zmiňovali mladou generaci, tak u ní zkusíme chvíli zůstat. Vy chodíte všichni velice do škol, právě proto, abyste mluvili s mladými lidmi. Co se zejména snažíte předávat mladé generaci ve školách a čemu by podle vás ve školách měla být věnována největší pozornost, aby byli, jak říkal moravský rodák Komenský, skutečně školami lidskosti? Milena? Eva,
It's the same situation. What was the question?
What do you say to schools?
What do I say to schools? I don't really lecture. I actually tell my story with slides. And then I engage the young people in a conversation themselves about what could they do and what would they do in that situation. I also take another piece up, apart from the altruism, courage. Where was the courage? Nicky had enormous courage in just pushing forward and not allowing himself to be afraid, either in Prague or with some of the bureaucrats in England, and he and his mother stood up to them. But from my perspective, we also have to look at the courage of the parents who sent us, who allowed us to go. And there are many parents in this audience. I'm also a parent, I'm a grandparent, I'm a great-grandparent, and I look at a 3-year-old and imagine how completely devastating and heartbreaking it would be to feel that I needed to let my child go, but I would do it because I wanted them to have the opportunity of a life. And in a way, those parents gave children a rebirth because many of the parents did not survive. And we need to look at that in terms of courage also.
Já také chodím po školách a vykládám dětem, co se nám stalo. Nejmladším je tak 11 let. A jedna paní se mě jednou ptala, co má 11letý dítě z vaší přednášky. A já vám to řeknu, protože dostávám dopisy. A ta holčička psala, že má doma 3letýho bratra a že někdy pomáhá mamince se o něho postarat. Když odjela na týden do táboru, tak se jí stýskalo a nechápala, jak my jsme cítili, když jsme odjeli a neviděli rodiče dlouho. A že už se s rodiči nebude nikdy hádat, protože má rodiče doma. A to byl její dopis 11letý holčičky.
My story in schools is quite different because I wasn't on a train, nor was my father. He was at the other end of the project. And what I use the story in schools is to remind them, remembering this Kindertransport project of my father started in January 1939 when he went to visit Prague and continued in London through the spring when the Germans came, through the summer until the very end of August. He was organising the last train for the 1st of September when the Germans marched into Poland and closed the borders to Germany, so the train didn't leave. So in 8 months, during which time he had a full-time job, he managed to rescue 669 children. So for him, it was a part-time project of only 8 months out of a life of 106 years. And I point out to them, if he can accomplish that in such a short space of time, just imagine the power that you have to make a difference in the world, and remind them that every day they change the world. Maybe in just a small way, by maybe smiling at somebody who's feeling a bit depressed. You have no idea the impact that might make on the person who's feeling down. For you, it's nothing. So in a small way, you might literally help somebody save their lives. And also, you might change the world by deciding not to act when you ought. So I use the story to remind people just how much of an impact these children, you in the audience, all of you, all of us, make every single day.
Thank you. Like the rest of the panel, I frequently visit and talk to schools. And I think schools are some of the best audiences because in the English jargon, those kids, they get it. You tell them the story and they understand what's going on. Now, in some of the refugee camps, including in Calais, but also in Jordan elsewhere, there are volunteers, not just British, young people who go and help in the camps. And they give a year or two of their lives in order to help their fellow human beings, helping with food and shelter and so on. And I think that's terrific. And when I talk to some of the schools in England, it's all I can do to stop the children all rushing off to volunteer. The teachers think they're going to lose the whole class. But what I like is their enthusiasm, their absolute enthusiasm. One doesn't have to convert, one just tells them what the story is, what it is that refugees have fled from, asylum seekers have fled from, the terrible things. And when people understand that, they understand what they have to do and what their responsibilities are.
Když jsme odjížděli a rodiče nás dali do vlaku, tak všechny nám dali takovýhle jména, lístky a tohle je můj. A moje sestra po letech o těch lístkách napsala krásnou báseň, kterou já vám ji přečtu. My number, a label around my neck in kinder transport days, when numbered children alone were transported to foreign lands to save their numbered lives, my number, 639, became a symbol in my aging years of vast significance. The label, tattered, worn, misspelled from yellows of years past, from draw-dwelling and neglect, lost sometimes, mislaid, shared with interest on occasion. My label sits now in shelf community with framed, affirmed and absolute in its blue and gold and flowers, touching the other pictures of my life. A suitcase doesn't mind the affixation of its numbers on its way to somewhere known, expecting always eager greetings at the carousel. And luggage labels still exist. Leather, acrylic, in bright colors, special stripes, codes, and places of destination. But I, a former child, do mind the numbers on my label, traveling its way to a place unknown. The string still rubs my soul. But now, in a different light, the label boldly lives, declaring life's truth on my 639. On that tattered brown label, good lives with evil, past is in present, and a life was saved, declares my honorable label.
To by byl vlastně krásný závěr, ale k závěru se blížíme, náš program je neúprosný. Nicméně chtěl bych vás poprosit abyste nám ještě sdíleli s námi, co byste vlastně chtěli, abychom si z dnešního setkání s vámi odnesli především. Co je pro vás v životě nejdůležitější, jaké je vaše životní krédo. Let's start with Nick. You're welcome.
What do you think is the most important thing that makes our society worth living in? What do you think it is? Me? I think it's each other, because without us as a community, we're not living. We're either in fear or we're hiding. And if you use that as a basis for a system of belief, of behavior, we should be caring much more, not just for the people we see, but the people we can't see, the people who've fallen through the cracks in the system, the people who need help. So for me, it's about our community and not expecting somebody else to fix it for us.
Chicken. I'll probably answer it a different way. I think that my experience and having Nicky as a model of my past life, I live with much gratitude, and I think that's probably missing for many of us. I encourage people to give gratitude for what they have, and simply to spread out a lot of love. Sounds a little trite, but kindness, love, and caring for each other, especially for people who need something that you have and they don't have. Go for it.
Let me answer this slightly differently. Some years ago, with advice from friends and colleagues, I moved an amendment which eventually was passed to allow children abroad in say, Calais and elsewhere to come to Britain. And before that amendment was passed, the Home Secretary, who then became Prime Minister, Theresa May, summoned me in and said, I want you to withdraw your amendment. And I said, how can I do that? I can't turn our backs on these children. And she said, well, if they come, others will follow. And I said, there's no evidence of that. That's the excuse governments always use. Anyway, the amendment eventually was passed, and it was passed because public opinion in Britain suddenly woke up to what was happening, and they saw pictures of a Syrian boy, Alan Kurdi, drowned on the Mediterranean beach. And that had an influence on public opinion. I was walking down the street, and somebody shouted at me. And normally when they shout at politicians, it's abuse in all countries. But no, I suddenly heard what she was saying. She said, keep going with your amendment. Anyway, I just said, you know, I've got another, things have gone worse. But I've got another amendment down in 2 or 3 weeks, which my Labour Party, my government won't like too much, which is to say that we should take children from elsewhere who've got family in Britain as a family reunion. And that is the amendment which I intend to push as hard as I can, and we'll see what they do about it. That's my mission in life, and I think Nicky would approve of that.
Já mám 4 pravnoučata a pro mě je to, já si myslím, jaký budou mít život, jaká na nás čeká budoucnost. A odpověď je trošinku v těchto novinách. Když Nicholas potřeboval najít rodiny, které by adoptovaly děti, které přijíždějí do Anglie, já tady mám ze starého časopisu z roku 39 inzerát v novinách, že hledá rodiny. A tady je 10 rodin, které nabízejí dětem domov. A časopis píše, že dostali 1000 dopisů pro děti, které si vezmou k ním. Což znamená, že v budoucnosti stále doufáme, že jsou lidé kolem nás, které se budou starat o naše praděti a že budeme žít všichni v míru.
Kromě nehmotné vzpomínky na dnešní setkání je v Praze na hlavním nádraží, jak asi tady všichni vědí, také hmotná vzpomínka, která je trvalá. Tak já bych poprosil, abychom teď mohli být svědkem jednoho takového překvapení. Možná to každý v tomto sále neví. Mileno, čí jsou to ruce?
Ty malinký ruce jsou... Ty malinký ruce je moje pravnučka. A ty velké ruce jsou naše. My jsme rodiče a to je na nádraží v Praze, malé děti. A ty rodiče byli dost statečné, aby posadili děti do vlaku. A to je náš pamětník, ty, kteří chodí na nádraží, aby to nikdy nezapomněli.
When I'm talking to audiences like this, I like to ask, if you have a child, how bad would your life have to be? How bad would your life have to be to put that child on a train and send them away to a country you've never been to be brought up by strangers that you've never met, where they spoke a language you don't understand? And I think it's a great memorial, a testament to the courage of the parents to be able to do that. I'm not sure I would have that courage.
No. A když jsme do té Anglie přijeli, tak tady je obraz anglické rodiny. Malá Eva, které byly 3 roky, mě bylo 9. A ta rodina měla dceru 16letou, ale bydleli ve velmi malém domečku. Měli 2 ložnice. A protože nás nechtěli rozdělit, poslali svou dceru, aby bydlela u babičky, aby se o nás mohli postarat.
My jsme byli moc šťastní s nima a my jsme je jmenovali Mummy and Daddy Radcliffe a byli s naším in our lives celý život potom. Přišli na svatby a tak dále. Byli úžasní lidi.
Moc vám děkuji za toto nádherné svědectví. Je to samozřejmě trošku Mission Impossible ve 30 minutách, tolik originálních osobností, které tu dnes máme. Moc vám děkuji za to, že jste dnes za námi přišli a poprosil bych na závěr této první části další členy té velké Nickyho rodiny z druhé generace Karina Konstanca Lechner, kteří nám přicházejí před 20-minutovou přestávkou zahrát skladbu na klavír. Přivítajme je, prosím. Děkujeme sestrám, ono je to vlastně argentinsko-španělské duo, sestry Anita a Karen, sestry Karin a Konstanca Lechner, za další část slovanských tanců Antonína Dvořáka. To jsem předtím neřekl, tak jsem byl vaděn, ale asi to nebylo tolik potřeba u našeho publika. Čeká nás druhá závěrečná část, diskuzní. Hned na úvod chci avizovat, buďte připraveni na další světovou premiéru, tentokrát ne muzikálu, ale uvidíte. Vítám mezi námi znovu Nika, vítám mezi námi 2 úžasné dámy z té Nickyho rodiny z další generace, kterými jsou Karen Kruger a Anita Gross. A mám obrovskou radost, že mohu přivítat také Matěje Mináče, režiséra, který má lví podíl na tom, že o Nicky Wintonovi víme. Už v případě sester Mileny a Evy platí, že je tam brněnská stopa. Jejich tatínek se narodil v Brně a Milena zde prožívala ve velmi raném dětství nějaký čas. Ale teď tady máme dvě dámy, které jsou s Brnem spojeny ještě zásadnějším způsobem. Prozraďte nám, jaká je vaše vazba na Brno. Karen.
Yes. My mother, her name was Erica Stephanie Turkle, and her younger sister, Daisy Suzanne Turkle, were both born in Brno, and my grandfather, Armin Turkle, was also born in Brno, and his mother, Sarah Placek, was born in Brno. I think I go back about 7 generations here.
Slyšeli jste dobře. Plaček, jméno, které Brňanům nám samozřejmě něco říká. Mezi těmi předky je také ten slavný Plaček, který, jak se v Brně dodnes říká, chodil hrávat karty s Gregorem Johannem Mendlem, takže máme tady přímou potomkyni. A těch příhod by byl zase na samostatný pořad několika hodinový. Anita.
Yeah, sorry, I have to hear the English. My name's Anita. My father, Hannes Irigros, and his brother, Karl, they grew up here in Brno, in the downtown area. Their father was a doctor, and the mother, I just learned, was a hat maker. And even though the Irma, she came originally from Ostrava, they established their family here in Brno, and my grandfather, I believe, was here for a couple of generations. So that's my connection.
Ano, Matěj Mináč se brání, že by měl nějakou vazbu na Brno oprávněně. Ale kde jste vlastně poprvé uslyšel jméno Nicholas Winton?
Tak my sme pripravovali film Všichni moji blízci a tam som vlastne vložil, že som čítal knižku Věry Gissingovej a tam bolo v úvode taká krátučká zmienka o tých záchranných vlakoch, ale nič nebolo na internete a vložil som tam do toho filmu z toho príbehu a zhodou okolností to prekladala pani, ktorá bola Wintonové dieťa. A ona mi hovorila, prečo si nejdem priamo za pánom Wintonom, aby mi povedal k tomu veci. A ja som bol úžasnutý. On žije, však v 39. zachraňoval. To je ako Karel IV, všetci sú mŕtvi. A tak som mu zavolal a on bol šílene, vtedy mal 90 rokov a hovoril, mladý muž, to nepôjde tak rýchlo so mňou, pretože ja teraz pondelok mám takú akciu a taký charity a potom idem na operu a potom mám zase nejaký obed a tak. A vysvetlo, že môžem za ním ísť zase za 6 týždňov a vo štvrtok medzi 2. a 4. môžem vidieť. Tak ja som si pripravil tie otázky, priletel som tam, aby som jednu ani sekundu, a už som sa chcel v bráne, ako otvoril, ho pýtať. A hovorím, mladý muž, najprv si musíte pozrieť moju ovocnú záhradu, ale mám aj zeleninu a ešte aj kvetinovú. Tak som to všetko pozrel, som to vydržal. Potom povedal, máte dneska šťastný deň, lebo práve som obdržal Carmen DVD, alebo ešte to bola VHS-ka, to si musíte počúvať, to je také otvorenie, to je tak úžasné, no ja opery vôbec nemusím a tak som bol, kedy skončí tá Carmen, na to dorazila manželka Wintona a pripravila pohostenie, a to viete, manželkou sa nesmiete pohádať, lebo potom je zle, tak som proste, Niky mi povedal 4 vtipy, na ktorých sa úžasne zasmial a povedal, že 4 hodiny musím ísť. A ja som ostal takto s otvorenou pusou úplne A som potom v tom lietadle som tak rozmýšľal, že aké spôsoby by boli, ako by som ho mohol zabiť. Ako. A ako som tak rozmýšľal, tak začal som to, že prečo to vlastne urobil? Povedal, že mi povie niečo, nič mi nepovedal. A potom mi to došlo, že on má nejaký dôvod, niečo v tom je, že prečo to nepovedal. Ako prečo mi k tomu nič vlastne nepovedal a že je to anglické gentleman neodmietne. Tak som mu potom vyviedol, ako hovorím, tak dobre, Niky, tak vy teda takto, že tak ja som ho pozval do Prahy, ako ubytoval som ho v hoteli Európa, čo bol kedysi hotel Šrobek, v takej tej istej izbe, kde bol. A to pozvanie prijal aj, že aj s jeho pani manželkou a že bude sa tam mať úžasne, že sa o ňou postaráme. Len som mu zatajil jednu vec, že budeme mať ešte okolo kameru a že pôjdeme na tie miesta a že vlastne mi, či chce alebo nechce, bude ten príbeh musieť povedať. A celý. A keď som to počul, lebo to ste nikde nemohli vidieť, existovala len to BBC show, ale nikde nebol vlastne, čo to bolo. Tak ja som ostal úplne hotový a hovorím, takéhoto veselého človeka, to musíme, to nestačí len v tom Všichni moji blízci, kde ho hral Rupert Graves, ale my ho musíme dostať vlastne, zachytiť ho v tej životnej sile, keď má 90 rokov a na druhý deň v podstate 90-ročný človek môže umrieť. Nie? Tak som sa hrozne s tým ponáhľal, hovorím, ešte žije, poďme rýchlo so štábom. No a potom žil do 106 rokov, a Niky mi vysvetľoval, on strašne miloval zabávať ľudí. A on mi vysvetľoval, že humor nie je solou života, ale samotnou dreňou, úplne prapodstatou života. A že keď sa chcete do niečoho poriadneho pustiť, tak musíte sa vedieť aj zo seba smiať, aj zo svojich neúspechov. A vtedy všetko dosiahnete. A preto iba chcem povedať, že Niky sa celým život vlastne presmial, bol veselý a mal obrovskú, ten dôvod, prečo on aj v tej Prahe zachraňoval, bol, že on mal obrovský zmysel pre dobrodružstvo. To bola pre ňo výzva, challenge, urobím to, neurobím to. Proste to bol človek z mesa a kosti, ktorý miloval život, miloval lietanie, všetky možné tieto, miloval rýchlu jazdu na aute, kde ho, samozrejme, to vám môže Nick povedať, ako ho museli x-krát vyťahovať kvôli tomu zo všelijakých priekop, on ešte vyše 100-ročný toto a raz ho chytila polícia s húkačkami a toto zastavili a že že ide niekde 70 míl a že tu je len nejakých 50 povolených. No a jaký máte, pán Winton, dôvod na to? A on povedal, potrebujem sa ísť vycikať.
K tomu není co dodat. Moc děkuji, pojďme na tu světovou premiéru. Budeme pouštět něco, co jste zdánlivě všichni viděli, ale zároveň uvidíte něco, co jste ještě neviděli. Tak prosím, pojďme na to.
I was producing and presenting a program for the BBC called That's Life. It had a very big audience. We invited Nicholas Winton to our studio without telling him that we were going to surround him with some of the people he'd saved. So we sat him in the front row and we didn't tell him who was sitting either side of him.
This is a picture of Nicholas Winton himself with one of the children he rescued
If you look at the very back of this scrapbook, and the moment came, and I revealed to Nikki and to Vera that they were sitting next to each other. And it was absolutely magical. Vera Gissing is with us here tonight. Hello, Vera. And I should tell you that you are actually sitting next to Nicholas Winton.
It was the most important, most meaningful moment in my whole life, because without him I wouldn't have been sitting there.
Well, obviously, I mean, I show on the film how I felt. Everybody was in tears, even Esther.
This is the only time in my whole career when I had to stop filming because I couldn't go on, because it was too moving. To hear about people like Mr. Winton and the foster families and the rescue committees. I'm sorry, I've gone now. I'm terribly sorry. Mr. Winton, have you still got that handkerchief? I had to borrow Mr. Winton's handkerchief in order to carry on. Wipe my eyes and carry on.
You said that if there is anybody in the audience today who was on Nicholas Winton's list and owes their life to him, would they stand up?
Can I ask, is there anyone in our audience tonight who owes their life to Nicholas Winton? If so, could you stand up, please? And Nicholas turned round and saw the whole theatre standing up. Literally hundreds of people who owed their lives to him.
I don't think there was anybody invited who wasn't on the list.
The whole theatre?
Yes.
There are times, you know, in a television studio when reality is so powerful that nothing else matters. The machines don't matter, television didn't matter. That was just a pure human moment. And how did you feel when you saw them?
That was fantastic, yes. Fantastic. And I've met a lot of them since.
It took my father 10 years before he forgave Esther Ranson for the ambush, setting him up like that.
My sme to vlastne to natočili a Milena to sem doniesla, Grenfell-Baines, pretože sme boli fascinovaní. To je vlastne na YouTube asi jedna vôbec z najsledovanejších vecí televíznej tvorby. Má to, ja neviem, 60 miliónov zhliadnutí. A vlastne sme to rekonštruovali, ako to vlastne celé bolo. A proste je to úplne fascinujúce ako vec. A skutočne v podstate tam bola taká obava, že keď to vlastne mu povedia, že tie deti sú vedľa neho, tak by mohlo prísť k prípadu, že by ho mohol trafiť parom šlak ako Wintona z tej emócie a že by to teda nemuselo pre ňo dobre skončiť. Taký slávny režisér Karel Rice, ktorého som intervjuoval, ten sa na to ako zničil, že my sa mu odmeníme tým, že zachránite deti, že ho dostaneme na druhý svet. No takže to nie je celkom ako... lebo to, čo aj teraz Nick hovoril, to, čo ste videli, že on si tak utiera tie očka trocha, to je vlastne ako keby ten paronšlak dostal. Proste to je britský gentleman, toto ako sa nerobí. Takže bolo to ako úplne uchvatné.
Tatínek tatínek nebyl zrovna typ muže, který by moc slzel, natož pak veřejně, nebo?
No, I never saw him weeping. I never saw very much of any emotion. He was brought up in an era where, you know, English public school and poker face, you never displayed any emotion. So to see him wiping away a tear was almost like watching him have a breakdown in public. It was extraordinary, extraordinary.
Karen, kým byl pro tebe Nicholas?
I actually got to meet Nicholas Winton back in 2005 when there was a reenactment of the Winton train. And I went with my son, and it was a life-changing moment. Once I learned that my mother and aunt had been kinder transports, and that there was a man who had arranged this along with the help of a lot of other people. It was kind of on my, I don't like the term bucket list, but I really hoped I could meet him and thank him in person. And that opportunity happened. And I think it was Max, my son, who said, you know, without you, there would be no me. And it was really moving. And I brought along a small photo book to show him at the time the 18 people that were alive because of the two young girls, my mom and aunt, who he saved. And he was so wonderful and so warm, and he wanted to know. My mom became a midwife in Cornwall, and he wanted to know all about that and how long she was delivering babies. And it is an unforgettable part of my life.
I have a bit of a long history with Nicholas Winton, and I don't know how many minutes I'm allowed to talk. My father first met Nicholas, or Nicky as he insisted on being called, in the 1989 reunion of Kindertransport in London, which was the first international collection of Kindertransportees who came together. And that's when many people, for the first time, who were on the Czech Kindertransport actually learned about Nicky. And so when I went to Britain a couple years later with my family and my brother, my dad said, why don't you go and visit Nicky? So my brother and I, we rented a car and drove out to Maidenhead. And this is a crazy story, but we're welcomed in by his wife, Greta, and Nicky, come and sit down, and he's sitting there in his armchair. What do you want? What do you want from me? He said, did you read the scrapbook? And of course, my brother and I, living in America, we had no idea what he was talking about, which was, to him, a complete insult. And I think by that time, he had many people coming through wanting to get as much information as they could from him. But of course, I didn't know that at the time. And I think that's before you came in the picture. But anyway, but then my brothers, who had been living in Czechoslovakia, because you go back to your roots, he had met one of the other children, and he said to Nicky, I think I know somebody who you know. And it was Ruth, what was her last name again? Halava, thank you, Milena. So yeah, Ruth Halava, who was in Český Krumlov. And then suddenly, he melted, and he was a totally different man. Instead of this sort of defensive posture, he was this soft, sweet, gentle, he couldn't stop engaging. And that was the beginning of our friendship. And I ended up bringing him and Greta to America to the Kindertransport Association conference in Florida, and he stayed with my parents. And then in 1998, 1997, I moved to England, and they became the integral part of me becoming part of the British society. They were constantly inviting me over and making sure that I saw the part of Nicky then that is really what I think made it possible for him to do some of these things, and that is that when he talks to you, anybody, he looks at you as a human being, not as what school you went to, not where you live, not where you are in society, but he looked at you as a human being and he listened to you. He was in the moment. And that, I think, was remarkable. You don't see that very often. And so, anyway, and it went from there.
Takto, Nicky urobil hrozne veľa dobra, ale vlastne nejakým spôsobom sa mu to vrátilo späť, ako som sa potom vlastne neskôr dozvedel. Lebo keď sme robili Všichni moji blízci, tak sme rozmýšľali na konci, ako ukázať, že taký úžasný čin urobil, ako to znázorniť. Tak sme na konci v titulkoch uviedli všetkých 669 mien. A teraz sa skutočne stali také veci, že ľudia boli normálne išli do kina, niekde v Amerike a tak, a zrazu videli svoje meno tam. A vlastne potom sme urobili ďalší film, Sila lidskosti, a potom Nickyho rodina, a vlastne sa strašne veľa tých ľudí začalo vlastne nachádzať, lebo to nikto nevedel. A tu ty si hrozne prispela, pretože ona to všetko vlastne evidovala, tie zoznamy s Vierou Gissingovou, a vďaka tomu sa to vlastne zhromažďovalo, lebo tomu neexistovala žiadna organizácia, nič. A potom som sa pýtal Nickyho, keď mal 100 rokov, že aké to je byť ako v takom veku. A on hovoril, že na figu. A že všetci tí, manželka zomrela, tí jeho príbuzní, kamaráti, ako tak, ale stala sa taká zázračná vec, že teraz mu nedajú pokoja tieto české deti. Od rána do večera volajú, oznamujú im všelijaké starosti, čo majú, pýtajú sa ho o radu, skutočne je takým ako otcom vlastne ich, a že i keď, že musí jednu vec mi povedať, že nech mu okamžite dodám nejakú sekretárku, pretože keď sú Vianoce, že to je údes, pretože tam chodí ten poštár s nejakým nákladným vozom, ako z tých blahoprianí, a on je zvyknutý odpovedať, ako on nemôže neodpovedať, ale že to by trvalo, aby na to odpovedal až do ďalších Vianoc, akože musím to vyriešiť, že som mu zničil život, ale potom povedal, že zasa na druhej strane ako uznáva, že je to, proste má takúto úžasnú českú rodinu, že to je fantastická vec. A že škoda, že sa to nestalo všetko skorej, že by si to ešte vlastne so svojou manželkou užil.
Can I just one moment. I just wanted to add quickly 2 points, and one is that he still used that typewriter with you pushing the keys, and when that one broke, he got another one with the keys that you push. He didn't want an electric one. So all these letters that he had to answer, it was tick, 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 tick.
Oni mu dali počítač, ale on bol asi za 2 dní vonku a bol celý šťastný, že je preč, ten diabolský výrobok.
Yeah, I know, that was funny. And the other thing was that I just want to say that he... Greta died right after my daughter was born, and he agreed to be her godfather, and so he took a very special interest. But that was normal for him, and he used to go with me to children's activities. If you can imagine, here's this elderly man, and I take him with all these little baby and toddlers, and he loved it. He was so happy that he was out there with his, the youth, And I just wanted to share the positives.
And in the same vein, he was always more interested in what was going to happen tomorrow than in what happened yesterday. So the children played a very big part, he thought, about our future. And the pictures I have of him when he visited schools or families, he was always keen to find out more about the children. Parents, less so. Less so.
Hrozne ma zaujímalo, že, lebo aj ja by som to chcel takto dlho žiť, že ako to urobiť, ako tú longevity zabezpečiť, tú dlhovekosť. A takže ja som praktický človek. A on povedal, že nič nie je jednoduchšie. Že musíš mať taký malý diár a každý deň musí byť totálne zaplnený. A potom vlastne, keby tá smrť chcela prísť, nemá tam žiaden termín. Ja neviem, či mal tých 106 rokoch ten diár, pretože inak dovtedy to fungovalo.
And his doctor was very unhappy that at the age of 104 he was still drinking litres of Coca-Cola every day, telling him how bad it was for his health. And he said, what do I care? At 102, it's not a problem. And then...
It was also the gardening. Nick.
Oh, his other advice for living a long life, he said, this is fantastic advice. I urge you all to follow it. Pick your parents wisely.
Oh, no, but there was one more thing. And he was an avid gardener, even in his very late years. And he told me that another way that you're supposed to survive and that you can live so long is because if you're tired after gardening for a while, you just hang in there for another hour, and that's all you have to do.
Přichází čas na závěrečné kolo, které bych rád začal u Karen. Je to trošku volná disciplína. Máte prostor každý říct, co chcete v tuto chvíli sdílet ze všeho nejvíc s naším publikem, podobně jako na závěr první části. Co byste si přáli, aby si především lidé odnesli?
Okay, I can think of something that I think is timely, and I think it's something that your father would definitely support, and that is, I'd like to ask every person in this room to really think about how you view immigrants and refugees. I'm a Holocaust educator, and the amount of anti-Semitism and hatred and division that's happening in the U.S. and other places as well is really alarming. And it makes this work very important, but there's also the barriers when teachers are almost too afraid to teach. This is in the U.S. Right now. And so the thing that I keep hearing that bothers me so much is how people will make disparaging remarks about immigrants, about refugees, and they don't even know them. And I had a wonderful experience at a Brno high school here last spring when I was field testing a lesson on differences, and it was about immigration and refugees, and their responses to having these conversations and their concern about how their own parents and grandparents speak about immigrants and refugees was very alarming to them. So it gave me hope that they cared about it. But as one student said, I've been at the school for 4 years and never have we had this conversation. And we need to be talking about it now. And I echo that and was glad to be a part of it.
I was hoping someone else would be next. There are so many ideas that I think are really important during this time. I echo what Karen says as well. I agree with that. And I think we have to take it a step further as well. And that is by also this whole concept of othering, which we've been talking about. It's really problematic. It doesn't have to be a refugee or an immigrant that people other. I moved to England, and my accent made me the other. So I felt it, and I even sort of spoke the language. And I think that's something that we have to bear in mind is we're shutting down, so we have to keep our minds open and be curious as opposed to being fearful. I think that, and the other thing that my father always said, trust but verify. And I think we need to start teaching kids at a young age to look at the facts and look at information and really try to see, does that make sense? Is that logical? Is that real? And I think because we're in this fast media world, it's not easy. And I know I'm one of these Luddites now because of my age, but I still think that there is a possibility. People who are younger are starting to question this. And I remember I was sitting in a train station in London, and I had just had an experience watching something where there was a racist act involved. And this young black guy was sitting on the bench next to me, and I looked at him and I said, when you look at me, what do you think? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, do you see a white woman or do you see a person? He goes, well, you're just another person. And that gave me hope. I was really startled. I wouldn't expect that because I had really been seeing all this divisiveness and quick triggering. So anyway, so I'm sorry, I could go into other aspects, but I think that's one of them.
Ja keď rozmýšľam o Nikým, tak vidím stále smejúceho sa pána, ktorý je v podstate, ktorý spojoval tých mladých ľudí cez generácie tým, že on tiež tak trocha pôsobil ešte aj pri tých 100 rokoch, že je taký výtržník. On napríklad storočný vyvádzal také veci, že on lietal na ultraľahkom lietadle, to je len také trubky a má to motor a proste keď na to pôjdete a budete s tým lietať, je skoro isté, že zomrete. A Niky ešte to spojil s nejakou svojou charitatívnou akciou, že potom mohli na niečo prispievať ako tí ľudia, tak ako lietal nad tým a ja som úplne ako... A sa ho pýtam, Niky, a to ste sa nebal teraz 100 rokoch na tom, ako na niečom takomto strašnom lietať? Ja by som bol úplne hotový. Maťo, keď budeš mať 100 rokov, ani ty sa nebudeš báť. Tak som zvedavý, ako to bude.
Three minutes. I went back to live with my father when he was 104. Not because he was 104, it just worked out that way. And I discovered something which goes to what Matteo was saying. And I'd like to use a metaphor. I discovered, imagine that an angel has written on a beautiful sheet of paper these qualities: brave, courageous, resourceful, enterprising, human. And they'd fold up this letter and they'd put it in an envelope. And when you're born, this envelope is put into your heart and it's part of your soul. It's who you are. And as you grow, you go through some disappointments and the envelope maybe gets a little bit crumpled. And over time, there's more of your life that becomes complicated and challenging, and it becomes a little bit smudged, a little bit dirty. And as you get older, it gets even more wrinkled. But inside, the letter is still the same as the day it was written. And I realized, living with my father, inside there's this lovely, wonderful person. And in every older person, this wonderful person. But often all we see is the envelope. So the message that I learned from living with him at the end is, he was still in his head a young man. It's just, you know, the envelope was old and tatty and broken and wouldn't do much. And it makes me wonder when we look at older people and think, God, they don't know anything. Actually, they were just where you are right now.
Děkujeme. Obrovská vděčnost za vaši přítomnost tady. Děkuji každému z vás, že jste vážili cestu. A prosím, přivítejme v tuto chvíli opět na pódium muže, který to celé zrežíroval. Je to jeho skutečný majstrštyk. Přichází znovu Petr Kalousek. Prosím vás o potlesk.
Vážené dámy, vážení pánové, my jsme v hudebním divadle a hudba už dnes zde svou roli měla a hudba bude mít také poslední slovo. Nicméně dovolte ještě předtím, abych vám sdělil několik, podle mého názoru, velmi důležitých poděkování. Jednak děkujeme samozřejmě vám, že jste za námi přišli, toho si velmi vážíme. Já děkuji také mým milým festivalovým kolegům za spolupráci, děkuji stejně tak mým milým divadelním kolegům za spolupráci a tady s dovolením budu velmi adresný a dovolím si jmenovat Věrku Kadlecovou, sedící v první řadě, bez jejíž pomoci bychom tady dnes v této sestavě téměř jistě nebyli. Věrko, děkujeme se velice. Další poděkování, neméně důležité, potom patří našim účinkujícím. Jimiž byli moderátor našeho dnešního programu David Macek a potom naši panelisté Karen Kruger, Anita Gross, Matěj Mináč. Děkujeme také sestrám Karin a Konstanci Lechner, děkujeme samozřejmě Mileně Grenfell-Baines, děkujeme Evě Paddock, děkujeme Alfu Dubsovi a samozřejmě Nicholas Wintonovi. Vám všem ještě jedno velké poděkování. A to poslední poděkování podle mého názoru, opravdu to nejdůležitější, si dovolím uvést otázkou, respektive jeho jakési pomyslné směřování a jeho velikost. Je to otázka, která už tady dnes dvakrát zazněla, nicméně já bych ji velmi rád zopakoval po třetí. Mohu se zeptat, jestli je v našem publiku dnes ještě někdo, kdo vděčí za svůj život Nicholase Wintonovi? Pokud ano, můžete se prosím postavit. Děkuji tedy i vám, milá Nikyho rodino, za to, že jste vážili cestu doslova z celého světa za námi do Brna a na náš festival Meeting Brno. Vážené dámy, vážení pánové, milí přátelé, a teď již nás čeká poslední hudební číslo.
Července 1939. Milá paní Wintonová, milý pane Wintone, jsme vám moc vděční, že jste se nás ujali s takovou péčí a tak rychle nám pomohli. Vicky nám vyprávěla, jak moc jste se o nás starali.
Moc bychom se potěšili, kdybyste si někdy našli čas a přijeli nás sem navštívit. Je tu opravdu krásně. Bydlíme v domě uprostřed lesa a zůstaneme tu až do nedělního večera. Připravíme vám velké přivítání. Suzy
a Walter.